I met so many regular cruisers on my Norwegian Viva cruise that disliked this new class of ships that I started wondering if Norwegian had actually gone out of their way to create a totally new type of ship that they knew current cruisers would not like, perhaps to attract different cruisers, perhaps cruisers like me. Now, I'm not a regular Norwegian cruiser, largely because I've not been a fan of the Norwegian ships I've been on, but this ship did some things so differently it made me rethink my position, as you will hear, and also you'll find out whether Norwegian new class of ships are right for you too. This new class of ships are called Prima class ships, the first being Norwegian Prima. Norwegian Viva was the second that I was on, and the third is Norwegian Aqua. They hold between 3,100 and 4,000 passengers based on how many people are sharing cabins. And on these, Norwegian have discarded their existing ship layouts to embrace a concept I found incredibly like Virgin Voyages ships, which is instead of having these big grand venues, they've turned it instead to lots of small venues dotted all around the ship to basically spread people out across the ship. So although it's a big ship carrying thousands of guests, there are almost no big central venues. Before I get into some of the drawbacks of this overall layout and concept, I do though need to explain some key additions and some very interesting and notable introductions. One is having a surprisingly small pool and pool deck considering the up to 4,000 passengers. Instead, they've created the Ocean Boulevard for people to hang out on and around instead of a big pool deck. Again, much like on Virgin ships, this is basically a widened promenade deck running all the way around deck 8. Around this Ocean Boulevard are infinity pools, seating areas, 2 glass floor walkways called the Ocean Walk, some bars and outside seating for quite a few restaurants. The boulevard becomes a bustling and busy space day and night, and it can get rather noisy, creating a problem for the cabins on the decks above it, which many people I spoke to said they found an issue. Another change akin to Virgin Voyages is they have dispensed of their usual traditional cruise line theatre to have a large flexible space where seats retract to enable each show to have a different layout. So a traditional theatre layout for the Broadway show, which on Viva was Beetlejuice, and then game shows they run like Deal or No Deal. For their production show called Icons, a review show featuring songs of iconic stars through the ages, it had a cabaret style layout. And then for a prom party show night inspired by one in Back to the Future, it was an open space with dancing and podiums and so on. Most evenings it also became a big open nightclub. It seemed to have what I thought a rather small capacity for the size of the ship, so getting bookings for the shows I found I needed to move really fast on, which also people commented on. One introduction that I and everyone I met liked, again very similar to Virgin Voyages, is the Indulge food hall. Though while on Virgin Voyages it actually replaces the traditional cruise buffet with a range of different themed dining stalls and carts and cabins, on Norwegian they have kept the surfside buffet, but they've added the Indulge food hall. Now this is included within the fare, and I used an electronic pad at my table to order food from a wide range of different themed food stalls. Asian, Indian, tapas and so on, and they are then delivered directly to my table. It has an inside space and then outside space on the Ocean Boulevard. They have though kept and built in many of the big entertainment features from other Norwegian ships, things that are not on Virgin ships. On top of the ship is the huge speedway go-kart track, which on Aqua is a water slide attraction. Also in this area on deck 18 is the Bullseye Darts area, Tea Time Crazy Golf, the stadium as they call it, with table tennis, shuffleboard, pickleboard and other games like that. They also have a wave water slide ride, kids aqua park, and then these long slides down the side of the ship from deck 18 all the way down to deck 8. There's also the Galaxy Games area full of virtual reality games. But what did not work that well and why? I found that creating these small spaces dotted around the ship to spread people around created a less intuitive layout, and many people, me included, found it pretty hard to just find my way around. It was so alien. This was made more challenging by the lack of a big focus area where all the main bars, the shops, music venues and restaurants are usually cluttered around on most cruise ships that we're all used to. So unlike other Norwegian, or in fact most cruise ships that I'm used to, with a big central atrium, this was not the case on Prima class ships. There is one sort of multi-level atrium with guest services, a couple of bars, Starbucks and some shops. But then I had to hunt out the other bars, the other restaurants, the other venues, because they were dotted all around the ship without what I felt a clear theme or clustering. That did all feel a bit random. It also meant there were some of these strange long hallways on some decks. They'd kind of shoehorned then in things to fill up these hallways with things like the Park West artworks, a couple of shops. The layout to me felt all a bit random, and I found finding places was less easy than on other cruise ships and other Norwegian ships. I have to say I didn't find Virgin Voyages particularly intuitive either, for exactly the same reason. Now on the positive side, I kept stumbling across new places and venues right until the end of my 10 days of cruising on the ship. So that was the first main frustration people I spoke to had with this Prima class of ships, the sense of it not being very intuitive and easy to find venues. It kind of lacked a sense of logic. Now the second key criticism they had is because of the focus on these small venues. Some of the venues proved to be too small for how popular they are, and they were actually quite hard to get into at times. Now the main ones I found that were guilty of this were the Indulge food hall, which is probably way more popular than Norwegian had expected. I often found it really hard to get a table at popular times, especially on my cruise where it wasn't always great weather, so you couldn't really sit outside, so everyone had to pack inside. The Surfside buffet also seemed way too small. For breakfast and lunch, they had to use the nearby Food Republic and Palomar restaurants to have enough seating, and even then, it was often still challenging. The Improv at Sea Comedy Club was always standing room only, and across the way, the Sid Norman's Poorhouse live music venue was rammed full and hard to get into most evenings. I think what's also important about this ship is that it's designed for warm weather sailings. As I saw my sailing, which was actually a chillier November in Europe, and the ship became pretty cramped inside when people could not be out on the open deck spaces. But this was further exacerbated by something Norwegian dialed up on this class of ships, and it was the cause of the third big complaint most cruisers I spoke to had. They felt a lot of the ship was closed off to regular guests, making it more crowded than it needed to be, as on this new class, Norwegian has not only carried across, but increased several of its well-known segregated spaces, reducing and absolutely definitely cutting off a lot of the ship to many of the passengers. The biggest offender people I spoke to that felt was the Haven. This is an access controlled area for suite guests only. I could see, because I was staying in there, that Norwegian have leaned into this very heavily on these ships. It's clear this class of ship is designed to carry and cater for more premium suite travelers. A lot of space is taken over by Haven suites across multiple decks at the rear of the ship. The Haven itself covers a large space on deck 16 with a lounge, bar, restaurant, two-level deck with infinity pool, bar, hot tub, sauna and steam room. It's a lot of space. They also have on the ship a large access-controlled solo cabin area with lounge. Kids clubs, of course, also take up a large space too. There's also a paid-for adult-only Vibe beach club with pools and bars, shutting off another section of the ship. Then, of course, the go-karts and the game space closes off another big part of the ship, especially if you aren't into that and don't want to use those. So we can see why, for those not in the Haven, solo cabins, or using the kids club or adult-only area, it would feel like they were being crammed into a smaller amount of space. Though when it came to dining, like on all Norwegian ships, few complained about the lack of choice. The included dining venues were the local bar and grill, the Surfside Grill and Cafe, the buffet, Hudson's and the Commodore Room, which are the main dining rooms, Indulge Food Hall, and then in the observation lounge there were snacks and a pretty good afternoon tea. Those things were all included. The additional paid-for specialty dining included Hasuku, which is teppanyaki, Cagney Steakhouse, Food Republic, a contemporary Asian place that I really liked, Le Bistro French, Los Lobos Mexican, Noma Sushi, Anada by Scarpetta Italian, and Palomar Seafood. So a lot of added venues. There were many bars, but as I mentioned, They were dotted all over the place. I did feel this new class is a conscious decision, though, to create a different concept for Norwegian, and also to their big resort competitors like Royal Caribbean, MSC Cruises and Carnival, who do focus on these big iconic spaces for crowds on all of those cruise lines. So as a result of the smaller venues, I did actually find the ship was way less boisterous, much quieter. It was much less noisy compared not only to those other lines, but even to my experiences on Epic, Breakaway and Encore Norwegian ships. I did feel like this is a ship designed to attract a different type of person, because certainly for me, I actually really enjoyed it, because I felt, although I was on a big ship, and I'm not a big fan of big ships, but I still had all the choice, but it wasn't as manic, it wasn't as loud, it wasn't as crazy on those other ships. Certainly, if I was heading back to Norwegian, the Prima class would absolutely be the choice I would have versus their other ships. Now, I mentioned that I traveled in the Haven, and to find out what that is really like and if it really is worth a hefty price, join me in this video where I reveal something rather startling about it that most people don't appreciate. See you over there.